Living to your full potential. That's the second strategy to live your one life by. If you imagine your potential in any axis of life to be here and you're actually performing at this level, then that gap will actually define your level of happiness, and it's your responsibility to actually fill this gap. Welcome to episode 5 of the One Life Theory podcast. My name is Rajiv. In the last episode 4, we talked about the first strategy to actually live your one life, and that was to live a life without any regrets. The second strategy, which is in some level overlapping with living with no regrets, but there's also some ways where it might actually contradict, is to live your life to its full potential. And potential is a funny word because what is life is something that you have a particular view to it. But I can, over the course of all of these episodes, explain to you that, hey, the potential that you imagined is actually only a small part of it. The potential to life is actually much bigger than what you even imagined. And the potential in all aspects of life, while a lot of what I'm going to say probably in this episode holds specifically to your work aspect of life, but this is around potential as a friend, as a son or a daughter, as a parent, as a lover, uh, potential towards your own health in terms of travel, exploration. It's all aspects of life. What's your potential? And the key there is you actually imagine that you could be a particular person at this particular point in time versus where you are actually in reality is going to define that gap, is going to define how happy you are with life. So, how exactly do you go towards understanding what the potential is? Now, again, there are multiple aspects, but for this episode, I'm going to focus on 5 questions that you can ask yourself to get to some understanding on what you believe is your potential. So, let me start with the 5 questions to help you better understand your own potential. The first question: what are the words that you would love for your family or your friends to describe you in your eulogy? Assume you're on your, you're in your grave, and sorry to sound fatalistic, but you are basically hearing out what your friends and family are describing you. What are the words that you would want them to use? Great friend, a mentor, a coach, a workaholic, a wanderlust, a great lover, uh, has a lot of PJs. It doesn't matter whatever it is. If you write down maybe the top 10, 15, 20 words that you want to be very strongly associated through your life, you will start defining a value system towards those points. So that's the first question you have to ask yourself. And again, this episode is more to give you a summary of what those 5 questions are. How you actually will use it, I'll come much later on in one of the later episodes on the 8 step process. But that's the first question that you'll ask yourself: what's the words that you would want people to associate with you? Number one. Number two, what are the times in the past that you have been extremely passionate, right? And this could be again passionate in doing something where totally you're in the flow of doing something, right? And this could be at work, this could be on a on a personal front, this could be on doing a hobby, it can be on any of these fronts. But what are those times where you've completely forgotten what you're doing, that you're totally in the zone, in the flow of things, that you just didn't even realize time pass? And that's important for me personally. For example, there are times when probably I was in IIM Bangalore, or when I was working on certain projects in Yahoo or Urban Ladder, or there are times when I'm traveling, I'm just completely, I forget myself, right? And those are the zones that I would call out as things that I was really passionate about. The third question that you would ask yourself is, when were you really successful? And obviously, there are some times when you're super passionate about something, but you may not be really successful. There are some times that you're successful at something where you may not have as much passion. And, the combination of the two is great, but there are times when they're different. And I can go back to, times across my work life, across different aspects of my personal life where I certainly was reasonably successful. And those are the times that are also important, because that also tells you something about maybe what your strength areas are, right? So again, I'll reiterate till now. First is the words that you would use, you would want others to use in your eulogy. Second is the times when you were super passionate in the last maybe 10, 15 years of your life. And the third is when you have been successful. Of course, for people just starting out in their adult life in their 20s, maybe there aren't too many answers to this. But this question is probably far more applicable for people in their 30s and 40s, where you have probably lived 10, 15 years of your adult life and you have some more answers to these. The fourth question that you would ask yourself, who are your top role models? And these are role models in the public sphere, these are role models from your own immediate network. But these are people that you actually look up to for a very specific reason. Personally, for example, I have two or three very distinct sets of role models. One is all the entrepreneurs, right? And I've been following people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, the usual suspects, from very early on. Probably the first time I touched a computer, which was maybe 1994, 25 years back. And Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs, these have been all role models. Their entrepreneurial energy, and I think I have watched the movie The Social Network probably 20 times or so, and it just gets to you in terms of as a motivation continuously in terms of what you want to be doing. The second set of examples for me as motivation is all the people who deal with happiness, who actually have energy to spread happiness in whatever way or form that they do. Right? It could be Ellen DeGeneres in her show. It could be Oprah Winfrey. It could be Jay Shetty. It could be Nas Daily. It could be a lot of people who are using their creative pursuits to actually spread happiness. The third set of people would actually be people who are in my immediate friends network, maybe my ex-managers and people who have been extremely calm around whatever has happened, right? People who have not shown too much angst in however the world is treating them. People have been calm at the phase of a lot of struggle and stuff. And these are three big sets. Of course, above all, there exists my Asthana Guru, who is Naval Ravikant. But these are actually important for you to understand what of those people that you want to role model. And that sort of falls again squarely back into understanding your own potential, right? The last question that you have to ask yourself is, hey, what are the top 2, 3 things that are stopping you from achieving your potential? Because unless you understand where your weak points are, where you're actually continuously failing, you'll never be able to go towards your potential. And these could be, things like laziness and, boredom at a very foundational level, or it could be decision-making ability, analysis paralysis. You're just forever figuring out what next. And I can tell you, I have been on all of these zones, even as late as in the last few months. So you are never out of all this, irrespective of what you have done in life, irrespective of what life looks ahead. So I'm going to reiterate these 5 questions that you can ask, and I'm going to leave it at that because I'm not going to sort of get into the details of how to use all this in this episode. The 5 questions are, again, what are the words that you would want people to use in your eulogy? What are the times that you've been passionate? What are the times you've been successful? Who are the top role models, and what are the things that are stopping you from achieving your potential? Now, as I said, these are 2 strategies. One is the one that I covered in the last episode on no regrets. One is the one I covered in this episode on understanding what your true potential is. And there are times when the two might conflict, right? You may need to make a decision. You may, for example, no regrets might mean you want to travel the world, but achieving your full potential means you have to slog out 80 hours to do your startup. So obviously there are times when these will be a conflict. No regrets means you may want to spend time with your kid, but your full potential might be that you have to figure out a sales meeting. So these are the times where you'll have to make sure that you prioritize and you allocate time well enough to make sure that you balance out. And at the same time, you have to make decisions for the next 3, 4, 5 years. It's not to say that, for example, you want to travel the world, maybe take a 3, 6 month break, travel and get back and do your stuff. You want to run a startup, allocate the next 5, 6 years and do that with full focus and then maybe take the break. Obviously, you can't have it all at the same time, and it becomes very difficult because obviously there's only so much time in the day, there's so much time in the week and the month, and you can't do injustice to any of it. So I'm not going to again dive into how to balance out these relative priorities. But be cognizant that there will be times when there will be differences between the first strategy and the second strategy. When the two merge, it's phenomenal, it's fantastic, and your decision is pretty easy. But when the two have some kind of a clash, you'll have to use other skills, prioritization for different aspects. And you always look at life in 3, 5 year chunks, right? You're not like signing off everything for the next 15, 20 years because no one can predict beyond that. So I'm going to leave you at that. And in episode number 6, which is the next episode tomorrow, I'm going to actually give you a very nice framework. I call it the EC framework. It's not EASY, it's ECE framework, which is going to talk about far more of the tactics on how you live life. These are the 2 strategies. And the next one is far more around, hey, how are you going to actually look at all the different options? So until then, see you tomorrow.